Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores our human condition. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. We talk with researchers and authors to unlock the mysteries of how to find our groove.
Now, you've probably heard about the glass ceiling, this idea that there is a leadership level that you can see, but you can't actually obtain. You can't get there. And it's something that women and people of color have battled for many, many years, and it still exists, sadly. Now, in this episode, we're going to talk about a different concept, one that will talk about the challenges in career advancement, but it's not about the top end of the workplace hierarchy. It's about the bottom end.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of speaking with Kweilin Ellingrud. She's the co-author of a book called The Broken Rung, along with Lorena Yee and Maria Del Mar Martinez. Kweilin serves as McKinsey's Global Chief of Diversity and Inclusion, and she brought incredible insights about women's career advancements and challenges to our conversation.
Yeah, that's right, Tim. And rather than focusing on the glass ceiling that we've all heard about for decades, it seems, Kweilin and her co-authors highlight what is called the broken rung. And that's critical. It's this first missed promotion from contributor to manager, which creates a gap that only widens throughout women's careers.
Yeah, it is important to note that women make up roughly half the workplace, but that for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 81 women receive the same opportunity. And the numbers are even more concerning for women of color.
Yeah. In our conversation, we talked about practical advice for women to build their experience capital and make strategic career decisions to overcome these obstacles around the broken rung. And I really appreciated her emphasis on both individual agency and on organizational responsibility around this.
Yeah, it's a good combination. We also talked about the incredible importance of what we often get referred to as soft skills, right? These things that build good communication or emotional intelligence. They are harder to build and to develop than the hard skills are, but absolutely important, and they should not be ignored for too long in terms of making a career a successful career.
Right. Now, with that, let's dive in with a very generous pour of the broken rung and enjoy our conversation with Kweilin.
Kweilin Ellingrud, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And we're going to start with just a couple of simple speed round questions. So would you prefer to ride a bicycle or a unicycle?
Unicycle.
Ooh,
Nice.
okay.
Great.
I learned when I was young. I learned to unicycle and juggle one summer with my brother.
Oh, that's
No
fantastic. Yeah. My youngest can unicycle, and we bought her a unicycle, and and I've tried it, and I am. Don't try to learn when you're 50-some years old. That's all I have to say. It's a little bit harder than when you're younger. So,
Well, my son did the same thing. He actually joined the circus. He's actually a Cirque du Soleil performer. So
Amazing.
so careful where you go with that unicycle thing.
I'm going nowhere near Cirque du Soleil, I can guarantee.
Good.
Okay. Would you prefer to learn another language or learn a new instrument?
Another language. I love languages and speak a number of them. So Chinese, Spanish. My French and Japanese is not as good, but I did live in each country for a year with a local family and went to a local school to learn the language.
Oh, wow. I am jealous. Jealous.
What would be the next language if you could master it instantly? What would be that next language, do you think?
Malay would be quite fun. It's actually a pretty easy language. No verb conjugations. To do plural, you just say the word twice. And my mother is Chinese Malaysian, so it would be a fun one to learn.
Okay.
Oh,
You say the word twice for plural. Wow.
I love that.
That's
So much easier,
interesting.
way
Oh my
easier.
gosh.
Way easier.
Yeah.
Okay. True or false? Equality in the workplace has reached its pinnacle at this point, and which really means that success today, it's all based on merit.
That better be false. I think we've come a long way, and I'm excited about how far we've come, but we also have a long way to go. And I see diversity and meritocracy as very much reinforcing each other at their best. They help each other kind of get to that next level.
We are going to talk more about that.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about this next question too, but just on the speed round and the effort to keep the speed round going, true or false? The biggest impediment to career development is the glass ceiling.
False. It is the broken rung.
It is the broken
Yes,
rung.
yes. All right.
Where we are speaking with Kweilin about her new book, The Broken Rung, co-authored with Lorena Yee and Maria Del Mar Martinez. I hope I've not butchered their names, but it's a fantastic book, and we want to know, first of all, like, what inspired you to focus specifically on this broken rung phenomenon, and maybe you could start just by explaining what is the broken rung,
Mhm.
and then what got you guys interested in it.
Absolutely. So the broken rung is that missed or delayed first promotion to manager. The fact that for every 100 men who are promoted to manager, 81 women are promoted. And it gets tougher for women of color. So it's 65 Latina women and 54 Black women for every 100 men promoted. So that's just a huge managerial gap that we have. And that first rung is the most broken, but actually every rung after that is also broken. And this book is really about how can women make different career decisions so that they can leap over those broken rungs, right? How do we anticipate those challenges that we're going to come up against?
And what inspired this? So how did you guys decide to write this book at this point?
Absolutely. We were sharing some of the insights. Each of our authors have led research in this space. I've focused more globally. Lorena's focused more in North America. Maria more in Europe. We've led research for the last 10 years on this topic of women in the workplace and how do they advance, and women more broadly in the world. And when we are sharing these insights, I'm always struck that it seems like it's new news, that many women don't know the facts. And if you don't know the facts, how can you better navigate your career, right? I believe that knowledge is power. And so we wanted to combine and just pull together the fact base, but also combine it with stories of success, kind of memorable
Mm.
stories of individuals who had navigated different career pivot points. And we brought that together into life in the book. Usually when we're talking about it, we just kind of stick with the facts. I think the stories add that different element of, I could see myself in that, or that strategy might work for me.
I'm kind of curious, was there like a aha moment? If the three of you have been working on this for many years, was there a point where there was like, oh, wait a minute, there's something that's really different and novel and important that collectively we've been missing?
Absolutely. And it was what we were just describing of, we talk so much about the glass ceiling, but it's
Yeah.
actually the minority of us who will ever have the opportunity to bump up against the glass ceiling. Actually, all of us have to go through that entry level where 70% of US employees are at that entry level, the bottom of the pyramid. And they're encountering this broken rung. And yet we don't talk about it because we lose ground so early, and then it just compounds from there. And that kind of aha moment of, yes, the glass ceiling, but even more so, the broken rung was what inspired us to kind of pull all of this together to help level set in terms of knowledge for women.
Quaylen, what do you think about the reason why the glass ceiling has seemed to be predominant in kind of the media and our social kind of consciousness out there, but this first missed rung has not? Because when I read this, when we read the book, it was like, I didn't realize this. This was a new kind of component for me. Heard about the glass ceiling since early on, and when even I was young, and that's a long time ago.
Yeah, indeed. I think, the glass ceiling, it's very visible in a society that likes to talk about people who are kind of very senior and very visible. The glass ceiling is something that we can all look up and relate to. But it's actually the broken rung, which is more, it's your common everyday person who is working at the entry level. Perhaps that's less aspirational, less maybe newsworthy, but
Mm.
even more important.
So let's talk about some of the downstream implications to this. What are the problems that result by women writ large, but then especially women of color not getting that first promotion.
Absolutely. I think that is exactly the problem, these missed or delayed promotions in the broken rung. And the solution is building experience capital. And what we found in the US, but also globally, is that about half of your lifetime earnings is due to experience capital, which is the wisdom, the knowledge, the things that you learn on the job. And so what women can do to kind of leap over these broken rungs is build that experience capital more systematically. The thing that surprised us was, women in the United States, but actually across all developed and developing countries are outperforming men academically. In the United States, 59% of college degrees go to women, right? Women are the majority of valedictorians, have higher average GPAs, right? Academically, it's incredible what women have achieved over the last few decades. But then we get into the work world and right away we lose ground. We start at 48% of the entry level, drop by 9 percentage points at that first broken rung that I was describing. Wow. And then 3, 4, 5 percentage points every single level, all the way down to 29% in the C-suite. And that's where we talk a bit more about the glass ceiling. But less than 1 in 3 people reporting to a CEO is a woman. Only 7% are women of color. So Black, Latina, Asian, Native American women all added together make up 1 out of 14 people reporting to a CEO. And so exactly to your question, what should women do about this? I think it's number 1, understand what the data says, and then make different career choices so that you can leap over these broken rungs.
Yeah, and when you in the data, have you found too that when and again, I'm taking this from my own personal N of 1, so this is where I'm looking. Hopefully, there's research on this. When I see women in those leadership positions, they tend to be in certain job roles and just HR or legal, as opposed to in some of the others. Is there a difference in that part of it, but then also in the broken rung, in the initial parts of it, are there certain roles or areas of business that tend to have less of that, moving that first person, that first promotion up?
Absolutely. In fact, all of the improvement that we've seen at the C-suite, so those direct reports to CEOs, are because women have basically doubled their share of staff role leadership or support function leadership. So women are much more likely to be the head of HR, chief legal counsel, CFO, CIO, et cetera. These are important support function leadership roles, but they're no more likely now than they were 10 years ago to lead the biggest P&L or the biggest business unit or the second biggest P&L or the second biggest business unit. And why that's important is when we look at CEOs who are promoted from within the company, every single year between 99 and 100% of those CEOs promoted are promoted from running that biggest P&L or biggest business unit or the second biggest one. Right? Almost never do you hear our head of HR is going to become our CEO. And so we want to kind of break that ultimate glass ceiling. Right. And it used to be 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs were women. Then for a while it was 7%, 8%. Then for a brief moment there, it was 10%. That's the highest we've ever achieved. We have to shift this line role versus staff role mix, right? The line role of kind of P&L ownership. But there's actually a few other things, and those come earlier. And our book is really focused, yes, the glass ceiling, but how do you kind of pull forward and in earlier parts of your career, make the best decisions for you? And a lot of these, frankly, apply to both women and men. Of course, our audience is kind of how do women make those decisions differently? But we would say, number 1, power alley roles are important. And the power alley is a job that is kind of squarely grounded in how your company makes money. In a media company, it might be in ad sales. In a tech company, it might be in product management. In a consulting firm, it would be actually in consulting. How does your industry, how does your company make money? And if you start off in one of those roles, your lifetime income will actually be about 20% higher. What we see is that about just over a third of men start off in these roles, just under a third of women start off in these roles. But you don't need to stay in them forever because they tend to be kind of more transparently competitive. As long as you've had some experience there and you know how your company makes money, then you can bring that to other roles and other rotations that you might have over time. So that's another important piece of, where do you get the right experience?
Yeah. What else? What else? There's keep going on this. This
Yeah,
is fantastic. I want to come back to some other more refined elements, but
yeah.
these top three things that should be done?
So, picking a power alley role, the biggest thing actually in terms of impact is picking the right company. And we argue picking the right company is maybe counterintuitively even more important than picking the right boss or even the right job or role. And when we first started doing this research, we thought, well, that can't be true, right? All of the kind of common wisdom and advice is counter to that. But here's the thing. A company that invests in your number one learning and development in an ongoing way is going to help you grow over time. The second thing that companies that are, kind of deep developers of talent do is they have a lot of cross-functional mobility. So you might get rotated to a different department, a different role. You're kind of rotating through different roles over time. And then the third thing is they've got a very clear strategy. And you can see this kind of relative to their competitors in terms of their financial performance. But companies that do those three things, actually people who work there and especially in their first 5 years, but frankly, anytime, are much more likely to have higher lifetime income. In fact, it was correlated with 50% higher lifetime earnings because you've
Whoa.
worked at one of these companies that helps you learn, sets you off in the right way, actually tells you how it should be done. And then you can build on that foundation over time. So a lot of times these are leadership rotations, leadership programs at really strong companies that are known for developing leaders.
Let's spend a minute on this because I think this was fascinating to me. I mean, not only did you look at cultural and geographically regional differences, but I am curious as to why some companies are really making it work. And I'm reminded of conversations we've had with Linda Babcock, whose work on the No Club and of course and non-promotable work is infamous, right? But she also said, she wrote for this book for men because ultimately, if they're the ones who are in the C-suite making the policies, they've got to be the ones sort of behind these choices to enable women more. So those are the things that are kind of in my head when I think about what makes these companies, these particular organizations, really do better. What is it inside that gives them the rocket fuel to actually enable women?
Absolutely. Enable women and men, right? Exactly to your point. They're developing their employees better because they are either setting aside a certain portion of that time or they're requiring feedback and learning. Maybe they have a digital learning platform, but an expectation that you will continue to learn and grow across your career and time set aside to make that happen. They view talent from an enterprise perspective. So they're rotating people across roles and divisions. And that is just kind of common practice, kind of a rotational culture. And they've got that clear strategy that they're executing. If they can do those three things well, and those are things that when you're considering a job opportunity, you can ask questions even from the outside to assess, does this company really believe in ongoing learning and development in cross-functional rotations? You could ask people you meet, right? How many different roles across groups have you had? And I think testing that from the outside can help assess, am I picking the right company? And it's not just the right company. Ideally, you get both a great company and a good boss. And you could also pick the right occupation. So in the book, we talk a bit about where is the puck going in terms of jobs that are shrinking and growing. We talk a lot about generative AI over these last few years, but there's also long-term demographic changes, changes in consumption related to all of that. As a result, there are some pretty clear job categories that are growing, and those are healthcare jobs, STEM jobs, transportation jobs, which also includes that kind of last mile delivery for some of the distribution companies. The jobs that are shrinking, though, fall into four categories. And unfortunately, women are very dominating in three of the four categories. The four largest kind of shrinking occupations are customer service and sales, right? Contact centers are reducing headcount. Food service, waiters and waitresses, we've all ordered online. Office administration, a lot of office assistants are either going away or being reduced. Receptionists are not needed as much. And those three categories are female dominated. The fourth category, production or manufacturing, is more male dominated. But you add up those 4 job categories, that's 85% of the 12 million occupational switches in the United States that are going to need to happen by 2030. And because women are so deeply in 3 of those 4 job categories, women's jobs are 50% more likely to be affected in this way. I think the only good news is we're highly concentrated in the jobs going away. We're also highly concentrated in the growing jobs, right? The healthcare jobs, less the STEM jobs. But that still requires transition from the shrinking jobs to the growing jobs. And in some cases, reskilling and upskilling so that the talent that we have today can be a better match for the jobs that we're going to have tomorrow.
So you bring in this. I mean, the book is kind of focused on, again, that entry level and first kind of components. But what you just brought into light is that there are going to be changes coming in the near future. And so, what advice do you have for those women who might be in one of those declining, job areas, and they may need to switch their career? Is it the same as somebody starting out, or are there differences?
Yeah. So middle of the career, maybe you find yourself in one of these shrinking jobs. I think the biggest thing, number one is understand which jobs are shrinking and which jobs are growing so that you don't accidentally go to another shrinking job.
Just jump from one shrinking job to another. Yeah.
And then there's actually online tools that can help you assess, I've got this job, I've got these skills. What could that actually build on in terms of a foundation to get me to a growing job category? So there are kind of online tools to help you do that. But really the biggest thing to future-proof your career, whether you're in a shrinking job or any job, is to build skills. And there are 2 particular skills that we're all going to need more of in the future. One is technological skills. And that's not, can I code? Because as soon as generative AI came out, right, it's going to code much better than you or I will ever code, no matter what the skills we build. But really this technological skill is, can we interact with technology to do our job more effectively, more efficiently, right? This now famous quote of, it's not generative AI that's going to take your job. It's a manager who knows how to use generative AI that's going to take your job. So how do we become those managers who are tech super users and open to how generative AI can change our individual roles, can transform things for our group or our company? The second skill that we'll all need more of is social and emotional skills. And in the book, we call these soft skills. There's this kind of misnomer that you're either born with soft skills or you're not, but you can't really grow them. You're kind of stuck with whatever you've got. And that's not true, right? Whether you are thinking about negotiation skills, building empathy, building trust, raising the aspiration of a team, soft skills can be built quite systematically. They're also, if you think about it, the real differentiator. As you get more senior in an organization, what differentiates a really amazing leader from a good leader is not their technical know-how. It's really their people skills, their leadership skills. Can they raise our collective aspiration to that next level? And also because these softer skills are very complementary with what Gen AI does well, they'll become more and more valuable as kind of that complementary skill. So if you want to future-proof your career, I would say build tech skills, build soft skills. And then in an ongoing way, think hard about networking. So many of our jobs today don't even get listed, right? I would say the majority actually are filled without actually formally going to a job description and a job listing. And what we know is that women and people of color have more narrow and more junior sponsorship networks, partly because women are more likely to have majority women networks. And if you combine that with where our women's seniority is across the talent pipeline, then of course we're likely to have more junior networks. And so how do we invest in those networks, get more comfortable spending time there, building relationships, activating that network, right? And that doesn't need to be to help yourself. It could be activating it to connect to people in your network. But what we find, if you ask, let's say, a vice president who was just promoted to the role, did 4 or more people help you get here? In other words, did you activate your network? Men are about 20 percentage points more likely to say yes, because they're activating their network. They're mixing their personal relationships with their work relationships, and they're making this kind of really positive cycle start. And women need to get more comfortable investing in those networks and making them work for them.
Hey Groovers, quick break from the conversation to talk about something we don't bring up enough on the show.
Yeah, that's right. When we're not behind the mic, we're working with organizations to apply behavioral science in ways that actually move the needle for leaders, teams, and whole cultures.
So whether it's designing smarter incentives, boosting engagement, setting goals that actually stick, or helping teams navigate change, we bring real science to real workplace challenges.
And we don't just talk theory. Our approach blends research-backed insights with hands-on strategies that drive results. Now, we've seen small behavioral shifts lead to big wins in Fortune 500 companies and scrappy startups and even in mission-driven nonprofits.
Yeah, and we bring the same curiosity, creativity, and care to our client work that we bring to every episode of the show.
Really, I think people might want more than what we bring to the show.
Yeah, you probably have a point there. You're probably right.
Okay, so we'll bring more care and creativity to our work with you and your teams than what we do on the show.
Yes, more care. So if you're ready to build stronger motivation, better team dynamics, and maybe even make your workplace a little more groovy,
yeah, reach out to us. Grab us on LinkedIn or Facebook or just drop us a line. We'd love to help you and your team find your groove. Okay, we've got to come back to the networking thing because that is fantastic. I love the way that you address that. But you brought up the soft skills, and you actually have a chapter on turning soft skills into hard skills, right? And I love that. And you open the chapter with this story about a woman who seems like her life is kind of falling apart. She can't even get her stuff together enough to get her baby out for her newborn baby out for a walk. And yet she becomes a best-selling author because she has these tremendous soft skills of listening and caring and being thoughtful. And she becomes a best-selling author and keynote speaker and quite an amazing entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, to what degree have we been undervaluing soft skills in the workplace?
Yes, I love that story of Julie Morganson and how she kind of transforms what was a real challenge, right? A real challenge for her personally. And then this moment of she's trying to get her baby out the door for a walk. She doesn't know where her keys are, doesn't know where the diaper bag is. And she missed this window. For all the parents out there, we know there's this sort of very short window. And she suddenly realizes, wow, my disorganization that I thought was just the price I had to pay for being a creative kind of, arts innovative person. It's not just affecting me, it's affecting my baby. And she turned that around into an incredible strength, became organized herself, helped other people organize themselves, and wrote a book about it. I think it's a beautiful example of how you can build soft skills, right? Systematically and frankly, to an impressive degree. But you're right. We undersignal soft skills as we look at job listings. Soft skills are such an important part of so many of these job listings and an important part of the job. And when you look at what we actually post on LinkedIn in terms of our skills or signal on our resumes, we often overlook the soft skills. We might say, I know how to program in these languages. I know how to speak these languages, but the negotiations, the inspiration, building trust, building coalitions, right? All of that is typically undersignaled on resumes. And we even don't talk about it enough in the actual interview, right? How do we signal these skills much more consistently? Because it's the real differentiator, especially for leaders.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you talk about that because, again, if you look at job applications, even the conversations that you have in those interviews typically aren't about. I mean, if I'm a hiring manager, I'm not even necessarily looking for those as you should be. You mentioned networking and about how important networking is. Tell us a little bit about the role networking has to play for women in the workplace, and what tips can you give for women who might be having trouble? As you mentioned, all right, if my network is more junior as opposed to expanding, how do I grow that network so that I include some more senior level people?
Absolutely. Anything I care about, I try to operationalize and I try to kind of spend some real concerted time, right, developing that skill. And so if this is one of your priority areas, number one, just carve out a little bit of time, 5% of your time, 10% of your time, and decide that you're going to spend that investing in your network. And then decide what are the best ways to do that. Is it starting a coffee chat with people internally And then every chat, you don't leave it until you say, who are one or two other people who you think I should meet, right? Given I want to get a job in this space, or I want to get exposure to technology, or whatever your aspiration is, right? It's often more helpful to network with a particular goal in mind of where you want to be and what relationships you want to build. Sometimes it can be more general of like, tell me about your career path, how you made some of those decisions. But usually with a more specific objective in mind, it's more helpful. But as you kind of carve out that 10% of your time, you can start with internal coffee chats. I would also spend some time externally. One of the stories in the book is around Suzanne Pruchet, and she actually builds her personal board of directors. And it's both internal people to her company and external leaders who've known her for a while. And they help her make a really pivotal and critical career decision. But building that personal board of directors can only happen through your network. So really invest time in it and get more comfortable, because what we see in the data is that women are less comfortable mixing personal friendships with networking. In fact, when we do so, women are more likely to doubt the basis of the friendship of, is she really my friend? Or is this just convenient from work? And what we see in the data is that men are much more comfortable doing that. And I can tell you from my husband's experience, right? When he golfs with somebody or has a beer with somebody, he'll say, yeah, the deal's much more likely to work because I know he's a good guy. That actually helps reinforce, right, the business side of things. So if we can get more comfortable with mixing those two, it will help unleash, I think, that next level of network building.
That's beautifully said, Kweilin. Thank you for addressing that, because that is a tremendous and important part of the book. Late in the book, you devote a chapter to biases and the cognitive biases that get in our way. And your advice is to confront them head on, right? So tell us what you had in mind about that. I mean, because here on Behavioral Grooves, we're all about biases, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe
we're not about biases. We talk about biases. It's not like we're
better.
for
That
them.
might be
We
better.
understand that they are there and present, and we need to understand them. So just to clarify that for all of our listeners out there, not to take Tim's words out of context.
Love it. And I think our approach is you're going to confront bias across your career. So we create a bit of a language and a vocabulary for it. There's internal bias, things that I've internalized based on societal expectations. There's external bias. When you see me, what do you think? How do you judge me? There's conscious bias, and then there's unconscious bias, which we've talked a lot about over the years. But what are the most common types of biases? How do you recognize them when they're happening? When you confront a situation, whether it's for yourself or somebody else, how do you be a more proactive ally to kind of reduce some of these biases? But we talk a bit about the data around bias, and, women are twice as likely to be mistaken for someone much more junior, or to have their expertise, questioned in their particular area of expertise, or to hear demeaning remarks about people like them. And women of color even more so than all women. So if the chances are that you will encounter, some of this bias across your career, how do you recognize it? How do you confront it? And then how do you move on so that it doesn't derail your career and your choices? It's more of a, that's an annoyance on the side that I will deal with and we will systematically reduce. But I know how to talk about it. I know how to recognize it when I see it and kind of power through.
That's terrific. You are also, among other things, other than an author, you're McKinsey's Global Chief of Diversity and Inclusion. What's that like today? What's that? What is that like to be the head of global diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Absolutely.
Today,
It's
March
definitely
2025.
An exciting moment, lots changing. And I think our work is even more critical at this moment. And that was one of the beautiful things about this book. We actually had our very first head of diversity and inclusion, Lorena Yee, as a co-author. Our second one, Maria Del Mar Martinez, and I am our third one. And kind of across the last 10 years of leading this for our organization, leading the research, but also leading the initiatives internally, we kind of put our heads together. But I think it's at these moments when our work is even more important. And I think the book's message is even more important, because the book is all about whether or not the organization that you work for is supporting this or not supporting this, you have agency. You control your career decisions, and you can make different decisions so that you can steer your career more actively.
Yeah, love that part. When you think about the next phase of business moving forward, and you talked about, all right, so you have agency and you should pick, it was that, pick the company.
Yes.
Let's move this towards, if you're leading a company, what are the things that you should be doing in order to, you know, be enticing and make that change to move to a organization that doesn't have broken rungs and really enables all of the skills and sets of all employees in there. Are there certain things that, as some of the leaders out there currently, what can they do?
Mm-hmm. This book is much more about individual actions women can take, but organizationally, the things I would suggest is look at your data. Where is your broken rung, right? Where are people falling through the cracks and you're maybe not getting the best talent at the next level because you have very different promotion rates and something's probably going on there that you might not fully
Yeah.
understand. And then I think the biggest thing you can do for men and women is be one of those company leaders that invest in ongoing learning and development, that invest in cross-functional rotations, and then have that clear strategy. And if you can be kind of a leading company in that way, that's the best thing you can do for all of your employees.
Yeah, love that. Love that.
You talked earlier, and I wanted to get back to this, the idea of country and culture, the geographical aspects. Your authors bring a broad base to the conversation, and to capitalize on your comments about how you have agency, how you can build within your own organization, how you can build your own career. To what degree does that vary by country or culture?
As we look globally, things differ quite a bit, right? So in the United States, women make up about 29% of that C-suite reporting to the CEO. That's basically in that top quartile globally with Norway, Sweden, some of the other countries that you might expect to see there. Um, in the bottom end, though, we have countries like Japan, India, Mexico, Brazil, where gender representation at those most senior levels is very, very low. In fact, in some of those countries, only half of the companies have even a single woman on the leadership team of those companies. And kind of the average, women's representation across companies is in the 10%, 15% range. So there's really wide variation in terms of progress across countries. Regardless, though, of how kind of steep the hill is to climb, I think many of these same actions apply, right? How do you get into the right company? How do you build the right skills, pick the right jobs that are growing, and kind of steer your career proactively? I think all of that applies across countries, across industries, across companies as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
Kurt, were
Tim,
you?
no, I'm seeing that look in your eyes of where you typically are going to the
Yes,
musical side of things here. So
always. I'm curious about that, but I am kind of curious, Kweilin. Here at Behavioral Groove's international headquarters, we often talk about finding your groove, and finding a groove, and wondering about if does that sort of make sense?
It
Something,
does. It does.
yeah, okay, good, you've got that. I dig that. So, when you think about finding your groove, how do you find your groove in your career?
I find my groove by trying to balance the energy, both personal and professional, and spending more time on the things that give me joy, that give me kind of excitement around bringing a new fact base to a topic that I'm passionate about. And it's interesting. It's actually one of my favorite chapters in the book. At the end, we talk a bit about finding your groove in a different way, but around personal health, because you cannot find your groove and you cannot stay in your groove unless you're taking care of yourself personally. And this is physical health. This is mental health, the foundations of getting good sleep, exercising, eating well. But also one of these, kind of misconceptions is we all know women live longer than men, which is great news. What we don't realize though is women live 25% more years in poor health. And that is the opposite of finding your groove. We also
Yeah.
spend more money across a lifetime on healthcare as women. And then on the other end, you connect that with fewer hours worked or the majority of part-time jobs, we have lower retirement savings. So we have lower retirement savings that need to stretch for more years of life, but also more years in poor health. And that is just not a mathematical equation that's going to allow you to find your groove and stick in it at any point. So just understanding the health gaps, advocating for yourself from a health perspective, and then the retirement side, getting involved in your financial decisions. And women tend to be less involved in these. The great news is you don't have to be an expert. The benefits from going from I'm not very knowledgeable to I'm moderately knowledgeable are immense. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to kind of get to that next level of expertise, but learn about it in small ways, read a little bit, get more involved in your own decisions so that you can make your money work for you. And honestly, I think that's the biggest way to get in your groove financially from a health perspective and stay there across a career.
I love this idea about you talking about not just your physical health, which obviously is important, but also that mental health that you talk about too, and doing those steps, that the elements of sleep and taking the time to focus in on those aspects. That is a huge component in all of the work that we've been doing on people getting and staying in their groove. As much as you would like to be happy and do the things that bring you joy, if I am physically or mentally, not in a space to be able to do that, it doesn't allow for that to happen. And then you can't. And then it's even worse, because then it's like you have the knowledge to know that what you want to do. And sometimes ignorance is bliss, but when you don't have that, then you can't do it. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, now I get to ask some musical questions.
Okay.
If you were stranded on a desert island, and let's say for a long time, for a year, and you could take two musical catalogs with you, two artists' catalogs with you. So it's everything that they've created in their lifetime. What two artists would you take with you?
Ed Sheeran and Shakira.
And Shakira.
Wow. Cool. So like some super upbeat, like get out and shake your body on the beach kind of thing. And I'm going to kind of chill and relax with some Ed Sheeran stories.
Exactly. But across both, I think a broad repertoire, but also some energizing and motivating music too on the show.
Yeah, I was going to say both of them have that energizing.
Did you listen to music while you were writing the book?
I did. I listen to music often. I have 3 daughters, a 12-year-old, 9-year-old, and 9-year-old, some twins in there as well. And they love music. So they're always introducing me to the latest songs that I haven't heard on the radio.
Cool.
And they're also huge Ed Sheeran fans.
I was going to say you're not a Swiftie then at that, because that's I mean, I have a 15-year-old and I will tell you that, the past few years have been, dominated by a Taylor Swift soundtrack. So
Swiftie years indeed. No, they like Taylor Swift and they love Ed Sheeran.
Yeah. Okay.
That's cool. So your top 2 picks are actually strongly influenced by your kids.
Somewhat,
Shakira?
Yeah. They share the Shakira passion less, but I grew up in Ecuador and learned Spanish, and so love just the variety of her music.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Kweilin, thank you so much for being a guest today on Behavioral Grooves.
Thank you.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Kweilin, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our broken ladder brains.
Yeah, we've got some systemic things that need to be fixed.
Well, and unfortunately, I mean, for you and me, that ladder is actually a pretty good ladder. I mean, most of the rungs are there on the bottom and at the top, but for many people, because
we're
amazing,
white
male, white males.
I thought it was because we were A students. We are top of the class.
So it's not only are we white males, we are middle class or above white males in our upbringing. We got to go to good schools. We got we had all the privileges, right? Our ladder was pretty good. We didn't have that many missing rungs. I think the interesting piece is that for many people, that ladder is it might have two things going up, and it might have a rung or two, and then then there's a huge gap,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out, can I leap up to that next rung and grab it, and then do I got to pull myself up? Maybe those rungs are worn and gross, and so they break when you step on them or pull on them, and as we talk about that broken rung, right at the beginning of your career for many women and people of color, and then there's also at the top, it's a glass ceiling. At the top, there's no rungs up there for people. If you use that metaphor, I am all about metaphors these days, aren't I?
You are. And I really love how you just really dove in deep on this idea of the rung being sort of maybe that's rotted, or there might be some scum on it, or that's been eroded away from weather and wind, or it's
Or
been
some
left out in.
asshole took a saw to it and cut, like, they sawed it to the part where, like, oh, I put my weight on, snap, and then I fall. Not only break my neck.
Okay, now that that's out of the way. So a couple things that I think that we should just mention as a recap. The glass ceiling is absolutely more or actually less relevant today than the broken rung, right? The broken rung is really something that's sort of a fresh perspective and deserves some attention.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that the glass ceiling is still there. It is definitely
Yep.
there. It has
Yep.
not gone away, as much as attention has been placed on it. What hasn't been had as much attention is this idea that, hey, those rungs at the bottom part of the ladder are broken, and it makes it more difficult for people. And what you talked about at the very intro, and I think Kweilin talked about it as well, is for every 100 men who get that first promotion, only 81 women do.
Right.
That's huge. That is a huge
Yeah.
difference in how that works.
Yeah.
I also think the second thing is experience capital that Kweilin talks about. Again, this is key.
Yeah, right. I think she said that it could contribute, like having good experience capital could contribute to 50% of your lifetime earnings.
Yeah.
That building this experience, building these networks, especially, but building the right job experience can contribute significantly through wisdom, knowledge, all that learn on the job stuff. Huge impact on your lifetime earnings. So it's worth investing in it.
Well, and I don't know about you, Tim, but if I look back on my career and I look at those first jobs and the experience that I got in them, it informed the rest of my career. It
Absolutely.
informed my ability to be successful. I was able, and I've talked about this. I had a mentor, Fred Baumer, who took a risk on me, and I was able to go and do training programs and facilitate like boardroom things when I was 26, 27 years old,
Yeah.
because he gave me those experiences, and
Which,
that is huge.
which reinforces this idea of in your experience capital story, choose a good company to work for.
Yeah, and
Culture
Quaylen
makes a
talked about
difference.
that, right? Pick that company that is going to provide you the opportunities as a big, good training program, gives you all of the elements. There are companies that are good and not. So do your research before you actually even like apply to a company, right? And then
Yeah.
lastly, leverage networks. Again, just like I talked about with Fred, that was a great way that he was able to bring me in, but it was a network. And
Right.
then I was able to meet other people and expand on those networks. And if you don't have a network, you need to build it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so the moving on to sort of a grooving thing, the thing that really struck me, Kurt, and I'd like to get your buy-in on this, is let's use some behavioral science to really build networking the right way. Right,
Yes. I
right.
love it.
Okay,
Love it.
okay, good. So when I think about networking, like especially for women or people of color who might have more junior or more narrow networks, you got to start by getting outside of sort of the easy part, the people who are like me, the people who are junior, the people who are also going to be sort of trying to get to the next rung.
Yeah.
Start
I
to
mean,
build
I will tell
networks
you,
outside of that.
right. When I first started working at BI, we both worked at BI Worldwide.
Mhm.
When I first started working there, because I was a white male, I actually got invited to play racquetball with a couple older gentlemen. That
More senior
was
in the
a more
organization.
senior within the organization.
Yeah.
They realized, oh, you played racquetball in college? I go, yeah. So I got invited to play racquetball. It was hard as hell getting up at 6 a.m. at that age and trying to
But did
get
you
to the.
kick their ass? Did you?
No, I didn't. I got my ass. With these guys are 20 years of playing racquetball. I played I had one class in college and that was it. But they kicked my ass. But it was that networking part of that. That was a opportunity in a
Yeah.
different setting. It
Mhm.
wasn't work setting. It was this other setting. And those are the opportunities that you have to search for and look for.
Yeah, so this is all about avoiding homophily, right? That Kweilin talked about. It's this. It's going to be easy to gather with people who are more like you, to identify with people who are similar to us. And in this case, it was older guys, sort of going, "Oh, he's a younger white guy. He's
That's like
from a
me.
upper
Yeah.
middle class, he's just like me." In today's world, we've got to really capitalize on the diversity of our networks
Yeah.
because they're going to be stronger if we build networks that are with people who are different from us.
Yeah. And I really do think that there is something, again, we've talked about, or we're talking with people about purpose these days a lot, it seems, and talking about big P purpose, that big meaning and different things. But there's also the little p, which is really important, those small things, right? And so, can you network with individuals around a common smaller p issues, like the routines or hobbies,
Oh yeah.
like the racquetball that I had? Or it could be about reading, affinity groups within organizations.
Yes.
These
Yes.
ways of doing this, even going out and just doing informational interviews inside of a company to help me understand what this division does, doing different pieces and being curious, right? So,
That is such a great comment, Kurt, because letting your curiosity lead you could actually help sort of reduce that availability bias that you're going to have when I think about, if I'm going to build a network, who should I go to? Well, of course, it's going to be people that I like to hang out with. I like to go to lunch with. But get outside of that and let your curiosity fuel the opportunity to meet with people who are a little less like you and
right.
could actually be contributors to your career as well.
Now I know for many people that's difficult, right? This idea of going outside of your comfort zone is very anxiety
Yeah.
driving.
Yeah.
There's therapists who make a living off of this kind of thing,
Right.
and it's easy to just say, well, just get over it and do it, and that's not always easy. But try to figure out a way that, if you are a person who isn't the outgoing extrovert and is just going to glad handle and say, hey, I'd love to meet with you over lunch or coffee to talk about what you do, that if that's really, you know, making you stressed out to even think about that,
Mhm.
is there something that you can do in order to maybe lessen that and to get that experience, that get those networks and to build those connections, because that's
Yeah.
really important.
So the first question is, I want to learn about what you do and how you do it. And then the second question is, because you're more senior than me in the organization, is what do I need to be thinking about to get to the next level? What did you do to get to the next level in your career? And how
Yeah.
might I think about that in my career? And boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh, people love to talk about themselves and their fantastic successes that they've had. So, very rarely will you get turned down when you invite someone to talk about all of the wisdom that they have accumulated over the years. I think that it's a great way of networking.
You are so spot on. That is absolutely true. And I was just laughing because I'm thinking that you're pointing to me and
I'm not, I'm
going,
well.
oh, that sounds like Kurt. He loves to talk about himself. There you go. All
um,
right,
I
Tim,
had an
I fully agree, right? I mean,
yeah.
so understand that. Maybe that's just a reframing that, hey, you're asking these people about themselves and people like to talk about themselves. Most people do, particularly,
Yeah.
the successes that they've had. So
Yeah. I also like the way Kweilin talked about this idea of building a board of directors. Like, what could you
yes.
do to like actually mix up your relationships so that you think about, well, what do I need in a board of directors? Well, I'm going to need people with different, very specific things. I want somebody who's going to be really good in finance, or really good in marketing, or really good in legal, or like in your career, what are you thinking about? It's not always just about people in your domain. It could be people who have pursued other domains, like somebody who is now the CEO of an organization, but they got the same undergraduate degree in college that you did. It's like, how did they go from being a history major to being a CEO? Like, that could be an interesting conversation and could lead someone it could lead you to think about, how could they be a board of director in my life, in the Tim Inc. or the Kurt Inc., right? Business that you're running. What kind of board of directors are you putting together that could actually facilitate an interesting life for you?
And I think there's a really interesting aspect of that. It is this cross functional, different perspectives that are there. And we talked about having a mentor, but we've talked with other guests about sponsorship, and that board of directors can help in that
Yeah,
sponsoring you. So
that's
not
right.
just telling you what you need to do, but being an advocate for you with senior leaders to say, oh, I heard there's this new job coming up. I have this person that I think might be really great for that job, and being
Yeah.
that advocate. There's and I will there's an aspect of my Rotary Club I think that is really cool. So City of Lakes uh, Rotary Club, the Rotary Club that I'm a member of, been for a long time. We have different committees. One of those committees is called the Vocational Committee, and the
Okay.
Vocational Committee is about your job and different pieces. And we have a number of senior people in the club, like I am now. I used to be one of the younger junior members, but I am now one of the senior members. And one thing that has been really interesting in the past year that we've started is that we are offering up a board of directors for some of our junior members, so in their careers.
Oh,
And
nice.
so we're providing opportunities for them to come and share if they're an entrepreneur or if they're new in their career, different pieces. And we will provide the sage guidance of the wisdom that we have around this. And
Cool.
the first one we did was a woman who is an entrepreneur and doing a variety of things. And we had people who were experts in marketing and online marketing. We had others who were focused in on the financial aspects of things and looking at some of the financial areas, and then and then just everybody's experience around building a business or growing that business. And it was very powerful, very, very powerful.
That's cool. Well, I'm looking forward to actually checking back with you in future episodes about the success stories that
Yeah,
that come out of that, because I think it's a
yeah.
really cool idea. Anything else that you want to cover, Kurt?
I think that wraps it up. What about you?
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's good. I would just want to say that if you are thinking about, wow, what could I do with about this broken rung? What are the things that I could do in my own organization? Maybe it's just a coaching call to get some direction, or maybe I actually need to make some changes to my team to actually help people on my team, help them form their own boards of directors. Kurt and I can help. We would love to help implement ideas for either you personally or for your company. Yeah, I mean, we're happy just take a call. Just let us know, reach out, and we'd love to just have a conversation with
Well,
you about your individual situation.
what is that saying that you often use? Maybe you don't often use it, but you've used it before. It's like a poet from another town
Oh,
can help.
yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, it's like sometimes you just need a perspective that isn't your own. Yeah. And this is kind of what I love about being a consultant, is that really it's very, very rare that I walked into a company that didn't already have a pretty good grasp of what needed to be done. They didn't know how to do it, but they knew where they wanted to go. And sometimes it just takes that poet from another town to come in and go, why don't we do it this way? And they go, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and again, I will go back to a project that I'm currently working on, where it is literally that they have they're designing a recognition program, and it was, for a matrix team, and they knew what they needed to do. They knew what the outcome was that they wanted. They just didn't necessarily, they had ideas about how to get there.
Yeah.
And, it was literally coming in and working with them on saying, hey, let's think about it from this perspective. Well,
Yeah.
what about this? What about that? And it's like, it felt like all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I got raised up on this pedestal, and I was just asking questions based on experiences that we've done with other organizations and other companies and the behavioral science behind things. And that was like, it felt like, wow, Kurt, this is like crazy. And I'm like going, thank you, but
You're amazing. You're amazing.
I'm just a poet from another town. That's all I am. All right.
That's it.
I do want to do a shout out to our producer, Caroline Schaefer, because the past few months, if people haven't noticed, we have been doing a number of new cool things, particularly as it relates to getting our podcasts up and out on YouTube. And that is due 99% to Caroline.
Yeah, absolutely. Her drive, her dedication, the expertise that she has built around all of this kind of work. Of course, our partners at Orange Wall that help us on production as
they're
well.
Fantastic. Yes.
Always have to thank Daniel and Louise for actually getting this on the road. That said, Caroline has been an advocate for Behavioral Grooves that's just fantastic. And we're really grateful for Caroline's work.
And although this is a podcast and you're going, well, YouTube is video, well, there's like new things that are saying podcasts are now video and this. So it's important. And I do love YouTube from the perspective that we do put shorter segments out on there. And there are some ways to be able to capture some of these and to share that information easily with others, because you can go and look at a 45-second short of something really intriguing that our guest said or that you said, Tim, usually not what I say. And then we go and you can share that on your Twitter account or your Facebook account or different pieces. And
super
it makes
easy.
You seem really smart, as a listener of Behavioral Grooves, because wow, this is insightful shit, man. There you go.
So with that, Groovers, we hope that this week you can take some of Kweilin's great advice on the Broken Rung and put it to good use as you go out and find your groove.